Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and today I'm going to give you 5 reasons to read Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. This is a stunning Own Voices queer contemporary story about Darius, who is half Persian through his mother's side, understands Klingon better than he understands Farsi, and who is taking his first ever trip to Iran under very strange circumstances. The family is making the trip to basically say goodbye to Darius's maternal grandfather, who has been diagnosed with a brain tumor, but also so that Darius and his sister can experience their history and their culture in a meaningful way. This trip is basically a huge reset for Darius, who has never quite fit in back home and is still trying to figure out how to navigate his family's role in his clinical depression. And he meets a boy named Sorab who is allowing him to feel okay for maybe the first time in his life. Content warnings for bullying, homophobic comments from bullies, fat phobia, some depressive episodes, brief mentions of suicide ideation, and some brief descriptions of terminal illness. Reason number 1 to read this amazing story has to be its brilliant normalization of mental health and, more importantly, mental health treatment. It's not uncommon to see mental health explored in YA fiction, but there's definitely a stigma surrounding it, and characters are usually coming to terms with discovering a diagnosis and eventually gaining the support of their parents or friends. And that's a very necessary kind of story where you're putting a name to what you're feeling and you're reaching out to get the support you need in whatever form that takes. That is extremely valid and important, and we need those kinds of stories too. But this story is one where Darius is upfront about his depression. His family knows about it. His family has a history of mental health issues because his dad is also taking meds to treat his own depression, and his family knows what he's dealing with. They get him the medicine he's prescribed, and they're supportive of whatever he needs. Darius's mantra throughout the story, whenever someone asks him what reason he has to be depressed, is to say, "My brain just makes the wrong chemicals." And I found that to be so empowering because he's saying nothing necessarily happened to make me feel this way. I'm not doing something wrong. My emotions are not quote unquote messed up, but rather this is just the way my brain works. I like that Darius is very matter-of-fact about his mental health. He understands how his brain is working and that he takes medicine to adjust the chemicals it's producing and to make it a little bit easier to navigate his day-to-day life, and that's just the way it is. Of course, Darius still gets a lot of inappropriate questions about his depression, and his father especially doesn't always approve of the way Darius reacts to things, so it's not like the message is, "I am treating my depression and therefore my life is perfect." I just like that this story shows Darius doing what he has to do to treat his mental health and that it's a normal part of his life. It's not the entirety of who he is. Reason number 2 is that this story has such a beautiful and complex family dynamic. I appreciate how present Darius is when it comes to his family, how he really cares about his sister and his parents, how much he loves spending time with them, and how that grounds him in a sense. Especially being in Iran for the first time, this whole family is experiencing a myriad of emotions. There's a lot of nostalgia and family history for Darius's mother, which she wants to share with her children for the first time. There's a measure of grief they're all experiencing knowing that Darius's grandfather is in declining health, but there's also a sense of unity and joy that comes from this extended family finally all being in one place. They're not a perfect family by any means, but they are a loving family and they're all very close. The dynamic between Darius and his father especially is really fascinating because Darius's father is very hard on him and he believes that if Darius would try to be more quote-unquote normal, he might have an easier time in school and just generally speaking. But what's normal is relative, right? Depending on where you are, how you feel, who you're with, what you feel safe expressing, and Darius is still trying to figure out what his own kind of normal looks like. Darius gets the impression that his dad's definition of normal means to be more masculine and perhaps toxically so, and that's not what he wants for himself. He's still learning that your own kind of normal isn't something to uncover, but rather to create. So there's definitely moments of tension in this family, but you can tell they all care for each other very much and will always be in each other's corner, which is something I love to see. Reason number 3, this story shows that Iran is a place of immense beauty and joy. This trip to Iran is really challenging Darius's perceptions of Persian society. He's almost surprised when the people of Yazd have iPhones and incredible architecture and cozy streets and corner stores. Is life there different? Yes. Does the country have its own problems like every other country in the world? Yes, but it's not at all the scary, strange place Darius thought it was. And as the reader, I really felt like Adib Khorram beautifully captured the atmosphere, the ambiance, the harmony resonating throughout this place. And it's especially beautiful because Darius and his family are in Yazd for Nowruz, which is the Iranian New Year. So there's food, there's dancing, there's celebrations, and Darius is getting to experience all these traditions that help him feel closer to his family and his ancestors. Adib Khorram's unerring sense of place and knack for capturing the quietly spectacular corners of this town really makes this story something special, and it's something I'm going to remember the most. Reason number 4, this story fundamentally understands the experience of being alienated from the very same groups you're supposed to belong to. As I mentioned before, Darius doesn't really feel like he fits in anywhere. There are things about him that make him feel different, and he's definitely struggling from a lack of acceptance. Being in Iran, he feels out of place because his mother never taught him Farsi, but she taught his younger sister how to speak Farsi, which means there are times when he is not able to engage by default. There's this moment when Darius is playing football with Sohrab and some other guys, and when they switch from English to Farsi, Darius likens the experience to Frodo putting on the Ring of Power and disappearing completely from existence. And if you're not familiar with The Lord of the Rings, basically when Frodo puts on the Ring of Power, he can see what's happening around him, but he's no longer a part of it. That is exactly how alienation and displacement feels, and it almost hurts more to be rejected in a way by the people who are supposed to understand you the most. And that also goes for Darius's family, because family is ideally supposed to be a source of love, safety, and acceptance, but when his father gives him a hard time, or when he learns about things his mother should have taught him years ago, it creates this cycle of exclusion and displacement from what should be a place of comfort. And I think the story is really about Darius finding ways to accept himself and forgive himself when he feels like he's not living up to the expectations he's inherited from other people, but also how to forgive other people when they don't live up to his. There's really only one way to be yourself and to be your best self, and I think Darius is trying to figure out what that looks like in his own experience. And reason number 5, this story tells us that saying what you feel out loud is incredibly important. Like I just mentioned, Darius tends to get down on himself when he thinks he's violating some kind of unspoken truth or expectation, because no one's actually telling him that he's disappointed them. That's just the way his mind perceives certain things. And I think it's a very American, very Western sensibility to never talk about your emotions unless the situation absolutely warrants it. Well, I don't know, that might just be a Mexican thing I'm projecting. But my point is that self-expression and emotional expression is different in Middle Eastern societies, and Darius is definitely being confronted with that in relation to physical proximity and closeness. But also in the sense that this trip may be the most anyone has ever told him that he is valued, he is loved, and that he is wanted in this place. Darius's grandparents especially are constantly telling him, "I love you, I'm proud of you, I'm glad you're here," and that really means everything to Darius. Sohrab tells Darius about this beautiful Farsi saying that translates to, "Your place was empty," as in the place you now occupy in my life was empty before you came to fill it. And the more time Darius spends there, the more they say this phrase to each other, and that simple verbal affirmation is life-changing for Darius. Darius very much lives in his own head. He lives in the world of things that go unspoken. He perceives things a certain way and then takes those perceptions as the truth, and one of the lines he's constantly repeating is, "No one had to say it, but we were all thinking this." But that really drives home the point that you can't take anything for granted, and just because no one has to say something doesn't mean it shouldn't be said in the first place. Verbally expressing yourself is one of the most vital parts of being comfortable with yourself, because if you're comfortable feeling it, then you're comfortable saying it. And to see Darius learning how to express himself throughout this trip and being around people who are not afraid to tell him how much he means to them is just truly beautiful to witness. I could go on and on about this book. It has amazing rep for a questioning character. It's funny and has all the best Star Trek references. It has an amazingly soft protagonist who just wants to make the perfect cup of tea for everyone he loves, and it's about learning to feel like you are enough. So those are just a handful of reasons to read Darius the Great is Not Okay. If you read this book yourself, or if you would like to read it in the future, I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. But that's everything I had for this review and recommendation today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!